It's episode 11. It's The Bride of Monster Kid Radio, and it's on the Waves of Disinformatia. That's the name of the song from the band Magnatech. They're a surf band based out of Germany, and it's off their album Tanzkapelle. Tanzkapelle? Yeah. Do you want to say it?
Tanzkapelle.
Thank you, Beth.
Bitte, you're welcome.
Thanks, Beth. That's the name of the band. You can check them out over at magnatech.bandcamp.com. When you're done listening to this episode of The Bride of Monster Kid Radio, make sure you tell them that you heard about them here on the show. There's a lot to listen to on this week's show, though, and I'm really excited to get to it. Of course, we've got Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review. He is deep in the thick of Ultraman Ace. I'm having a blast with that segment. Even episodes that I haven't seen in a very long time. You know, he is just bringing them back for me, and I'm loving it. I hope you're loving it, too. Also, Weird Wednesday happened at the Joy Cinema back in the Portland, Oregon area, Tigard, Oregon in particular. Well, Beth and I can't be there because we're here in the Phoenix area in Arizona, but our very own Jeff is there, and he went to go see Batwoman, and he called in his thoughts about that. A big chunk of this episode, though, is devoted to an interview that I did with writer Micah Swanson Harris. Micah Harris is a Monster Kid Radio irregular, and he's been on the show in the past. It's been a while since I've had him on the show, so we caught up a little bit, found out what he's been up to, and then talked about his brand new Kong, the evolving narrative, the Annotated Novelization. It's a brand new paperback, came out the day after Christmas last year. It's all about King Kong and the novelization of King Kong, originally written by Delos W. Loveless. We're going to learn a little bit more about Loveless and his wife, and just the King Kong novel and some of the things that Micah did to get ready to write this annotated version of the novel. It's really cool. It's a fun interview. I can't wait to get to it. So we're going to get to that. We got Jeff's call from Weird Wednesday. We've got the Mark Matzke Beta Capsule review. We've got a lot to get to. So why don't we go ahead and dive into that right after this.
I am the vampire. All living things are my prey. The undead are my allies. The night is my domain, and the dark, dank tomb my dwelling place. I feast on human blood. May be yours. So beware, beware.
Brand new, all new, the return of Dracula. From beyond the grave comes the dreaded Dracula, spreading corruption and horror wherever his cursed shadow falls. Innocent beauty becomes the vampire's prey, as paralyzing fear turns to hypnotic fascination.
You will do as I say.
Yes.
I bring you death, a living death. One drop of your blood and you're bound to me.
Jenny Blake's soul must be freed, Doctor. And all of the souls of her victims, if any.
But how?
With a pointed stake right through the heart. He's gone.
From caves and sewers come the slime people. The kill, kill, kill. There is no escape from the slime people. The slime people. Nothing can stop the horror of the slime people. For a a new adventure in terror. Live through the wild bloodbath of the slime people. With lust they come, with vengeance and murder. See the nightmare of the slime people.
Hello, friends. This is Jeff calling with a weird Wednesday report from the Joy Cinema in Tigard, Oregon, where I just saw the Mexican movie The Batwoman. I am not going to insult our Spanish-speaking listeners by trying to pronounce the Spanish title. This was a fun movie. Not entirely sure who it was meant for. At points that whether silly, not Batman 56-esque campy, but still some parts seem to be aimed for kids. Kind of almost a Power Rangers kind of thing. But then the Batwoman's main costume, very much for the dads, and there's some actual violence and gruesomeness. So, I'd be interested to find out who the original target audience was. Couldn't find a lot online. There is a Blu-ray out that's supposed to have a lot of special features and a booklet. I would be very interested in having that so I could find out more about this movie. The Batwoman herself, the actress's name was Maura Monti. She was born in Italy, but grew up with her mother in Mexico, which is why you have an Italian actress, or Italian-born actress, in the Mexican film. Incredibly beautiful woman. Costume was very interesting. The cowl was very much of the Adam West style bat cowl. Her main costume when she's out fighting crime is a bikini. When she's being a luchadora, it is gray sweats with blue trunk. Very reminiscent of that era of Batman's costume. Just so no one's confused, this has nothing to do with any DC comic characters. Well, I'm rather surprised, and I've looked. As far as I could tell, she's never been homaged in a DC comic. This is the kind of thing I would expect Alex Ross to put in the background of a painting somewhere. And as far as I can tell, it hasn't been done. I'm really surprised. Anyway, it's fun. It's silly. An hour and 20 minutes. It actually seems a little long. Which sounds really afraid to say about an hour and 20 minute movie, especially when I was enjoying. The version I saw was dubbed, not Spanish with subtitles. I would be interested in seeing the Spanish with subtitles so I can hear the actual voices of the thespians. Anyway, not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's fun. If you want to have some spare time, spare hour and a half, find it. I think it's even available on YouTube.
Now, Jeff did call back with some further thoughts about having seen Batwoman at the Joy Cinema as part of Weird Wednesday. But before we get to that, I wanted to take a second to point out, one, we've talked about this movie on the podcast in the past. Chris McMillan and I talked about this movie a couple years ago during a Lucha de Mayo celebration. This would have been episode 523 back in 2021. You can check out the archives over at monsterkidradio.net to find that episode of the podcast. Season 1 of the podcast. We were just Monster Kid Radio back then. And 2, we have a shirt celebrating this movie available for sale in our TeePublic shop. Now, if you go to teepublic.com/stores/Monster Kid Radio, you're going to come to our TeePublic shop, where I've also recently just uploaded a new Tingler design. You're going to find all of the t-shirts there, all of the merchandise that we sell through TeePublic. T-shirts, hats, totes, magnets, stickers, all that stuff is over there. Go check that out. I'll also make sure there's a link in the show notes. However, to get directly to the Batwoman t-shirt, I'm going to recommend you just go to tinyurl.com/BatwomanT, and that's T spelled out, T-E-E. I did this so that you can just go straight there and pick up that t-shirt or button or magnet or whatever you'd like with the Batwoman design. It's kind of hard to find in the shop because I did label it originally with the Spanish title, and like Jeff, I cannot pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try. But yeah, go over to tinyurl.com/BatwomanT, and you'll find it. Again, check the link in the show notes. And here's Jeff with the rest of his thoughts about the movie. Thanks for calling in, Jeff. Thanks for going to Weird Wednesday and being our eyes and, I guess, ears at all things happening at the Joy Cinema.
Two more ideas to splice into my previous message.
One is that the actress Moravanti, although the character of Batwoman is a luchadora, Moravanti herself, not a luchadora at all. In fact, it's pretty obvious that it's a body double for the parts. Although, from what I read, she did do a lot of her own stunt color-wise, which is kind of neat. The climax of the movie is exciting and I think pretty good. However, there is a stinger at the end, where, it's the Star Trek scene where they stand around laughing at a thing. And Gloria and the two people that know for sure identity is Batwoman are in her home. And it's a really stupid ending that works against the strength of the Batwoman character. We've had this movie showing that she is strong and capable and skilled in so many things. And, well, I mean, it's okay. This movie's older than I am. I will spoil it. She's afraid of a mouse at the very end and jumps up in the arms of the two guys that know her secret identity. Oh, and one of them even says something like, "Oh, women." Oh, so bad. Maybe after the bad guys defeated, you're gonna watch this, stop watching at that point so you don't get this stupid little tag. Anyway, otherwise, it is an enjoyable movie. Not gonna make any award lists. Well, maybe the Razzies. I did see MST3K cover this once. I have seen it. I'm not an MST3K fan. But it is out there if you're interested. And that's it. Stay safe and have fun. Monster Kids, Derek and Beth, I love you too. And I hope you're doing okay. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.
How much shot can you take? It will haunt you forever. From the depth of evil comes a diabolic killer of beautiful women. The vampire's coffin. See a vampire's body stolen from its tomb. A psycho killer removes the stake so the vampire can again prey on beautiful women. It's in the vampire's coffin. And to complete a double night of horror, a monstrous nightmare of terror, turn loose in a fight to the death. The robot versus the Aztec mummy. They will bring you a night of terror. We dare you to see them, but don't come alone. The Vampire's Coffin in an all-new double horrorama show with The Robot versus the Aztec Mummy, presented in Hypnoscope. To heighten the horror, shock your senses, chill your brain. It could only be shown at midnight.
Out of the darkness of the ancient past, out of the dust of centuries and the inscrutable silence of the unknown, come two new adventures in shock and suspense on one sensational motion picture program. The Mummy, plus Curse of the Undead.
Fear will freeze you when you face the Mummy.
It tears steel bars like paper.
It snaps men's spines like matchsticks.
It walks through bullets like a ghost. Wakened from the darkest tomb of the pharaohs, it stalks the earth with strangely human desires.
The Mummy.
And on the same program, Curse of the Undead.
The haunting story of a faceless fiend who drained the young and beautiful of life.
Together on one program, Curse of the Undead, and in chilling Technicolor,
The Mummy.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Ultraman Ace, Episode 25, Pyramid is a Terrible Monster's Nest. Toxic red smoke interrupts a grade school's calisthenics class. TAC investigates, and the red smoke reappears, along with a silver pyramid that emerges from the ground. A young woman walks right through the smoke, seemingly unaffected. At the hospital, she refuses a blood test and claims that a blood transfusion would kill her. Leaving the hospital, it's revealed she's carrying a bag of red smoke in her purse and uses it as an inhaler of sorts. TAC picks her up again, and Hokuto and Minami find themselves at odds over whether or not to be suspicious of her. Minami, definitely in the suspicious camp, catches the woman in the act of planting a bomb at TAC headquarters. After a chase, she confesses to Minami that she is an Orion alien. Before Minami can reply, she becomes entrapped in the pyramid, where she learns its true history and Orion's plan to reclaim life on the Earth's surface, moments before terrible monster Sphinx is unleashed. Episode 25, which premiered September 22, 1972, is a strong entry near the midpoint of the series. Chief among its positive attributes is its story, which puts the Hokuto-Minami relationship to the test in their differences over Michiru, the woman who turns out to be an Orion alien. In a neat way, they both end up being right. Minami was wise to be cautious, and Hokuto's compassion leaves the door open for the redemption of Michiru. And though subtle, it's one of the most direct expressions of Ace's dual nature the show ever gives us. Add to that some fantastic effects work and a visually appealing terrible monster in Sphinx with a very 70s Ancient Aliens backstory, and you've got a can't-miss episode of Ultraman Ace. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
Picture of all time.
Don't let him get me!
A beautiful girl torn from the arms of her lover by a jungle beast. King Kong.
See a battle between prehistoric monsters on an island time forgot.
A nightmare jungle creature from the primeval past stalking midnight streets.
My baby! It's got my baby!
See the thrill classic of all time, the biggest gorilla picture ever made in motion picture history. The jungle epic that can never be duplicated.
See RKO's original...
King Kong.
King Kong!
King Kong!
It is 1976. The American merchant vessel Petrox Explorer has just set sail from the port of Surabaya in search of oil. What they find will shock the world.
We may be sailing into the history books.
She's alive!
You know, maybe my luck has changed.
They will discover an uncharted island that is the home of the most incredible creature on the face of the earth. A creature called Kong. Dino De Laurentiis presents the most exciting, original motion picture event of all time. King Kong. King Kong, a fantastic adventure. Open the gate! King Kong. King Kong, unlike anything you've ever experienced before. With Jeff Bridges, Charles Grodin, and introducing Jessica Lange as the beauty who charmed the beast. And starring the eighth wonder of the world, King Kong.
Bride of Monster Kid Radio listeners, it's been a long time since I've had any kind of conversation with this week's guest, but his words are still with me because the man's an incredible author. I've got a number of his books on my shelf, and he's got a new book out now that we're going to talk about. I'd like to welcome to the show. Welcome back to the podcast, Micah Harris.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Man, it's good to be back.
How's it been going? Let's do a little bit of catch up. I know we did a little bit of that off mic, but
right.
What can we tell the listeners about what you've been up to?
Well, I've continued writing since we last talked, and I have a fantasy series. I have 4 volumes out, a trilogy and a novella, and I'm currently working on a 5th book in that series. And in terms of Monster Kid related material, I did write a article for Wonder Magazine on the Rankin Bass King Kong. This is thematic. Or you can,
nice.
Yeah, or at least or maybe I just have a one-track mind, you know? But
no, hey, if there's any track to get stuck on, the Kong track is the best one to be on.
That's a good track,
yeah.
Yes. And so you know, I noticed the use that Rankin Bass had made of either Kong or a Kong figure, going back to Bumble, you know, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He's got his own Carl Denham and Yukon Cornelius. And so I got to looking at it and found out, sure enough, that Arthur Rankin was a first-generation Kong fan, and he intentionally put either Kong or a Kong reference, if it was a dinosaur or a big ape figure or something that he made. And of course, they did go on to do the Saturday morning King Kong cartoon series, which I love this. It's sandwiched 2 Kong episodes, sandwiched an episode of Tom of Thumb, which this was the days of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. and all that, you know, the spy craze sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love their slogan. They gave their height for their country. So, you know, you're getting the extremes there of Kong to Tom of Thumb, right? And it was interesting. I never paid attention to it, but even the Kong family's last name was Bond. And so they had this kind of little subtle spy theme, you know, at times. And of course, that spun off into the Toho collaboration that Rankin Bass did, King Kong Escapes. And I got to talk to Linda Miller, which was fantastic, you know, wonderful lady, interview her for that. I wrote that. That's been a little while now, but that is available on Amazon. Also, I contributed to the last volume of the Tales of the Shadow Men anthology. I wrote a kind of long story called The Secret Alchemy of Very Bad Balloons. And it was a proposed origin story for Rover from The Prisoner. But I crossed over different things like Kiss Me Deadly. And also, you remember Pulp Fiction, the attaché case they open with the golden light and all that.
Mhm.
I gave that golden light an origin story. That
Oh.
golden light is the character now. Yeah. And then, of course, I did tie it into my beloved Twin Peaks as well. Throw in a lot of references, the things I love. That was the last volume. So everything's from the Beatles to Kate Bush. I was trying to get it in there. So that was a pretty epic little story.
Right on. We talk about monster movies here. What are some classic monster movies you've watched lately?
Wow, classics. I've started kind of a little informal movie club at my house.
All right.
We watched The Leopard Man.
I was just talking about Val Lewton films with Matt Rashley, who was on the show last week.
Uh-huh.
And he's not seen many Val Lewton films.
Well, he's got something to look forward to there.
I really liked The Leopard Man. I had it the first time I saw that was in a theater on the big screen. And, it was so
great.
good.
I bet. I mean, like that last scene with the Day of the Dead parade with the Inquisitor stuff. Oh, I bet it was great. It is deep. Yeah. So we watched that. And also for Christmas, we watched that great Val Lewton Christmas film, Curse of the Cat People. Because
Nice.
Look at it proportionately. I bet as much of it takes place at Christmas as It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
So we did 2 Val Lewtons. And the night that we watched The Leopard Man, we said sort of a, Mexican, because, the Leopard Man's on the border between America and Mexico, right? So it had a Mexican horror theme. So we went from the sublime to the ridiculous and watched Santo and the Treasure of Dracula.
Oh.
So that was our double feature, The Leopard Man and Santo. And I got to say, what did we enjoy more? Santo the Treasure is incredible. And I got to see color this time, because I got a set with it in color, and
that is a double feature.
So yeah, those are the ones in terms of classic horror that come to mind. I did watch the Terrence Fisher co-directed movie. It wasn't a horror movie, but something. What is it? At the Fair. It has Gene Simmons in it, and it's very Hitchcockian. It's like 19th century, and she and her brother, who's the dad from Mary Poppins, I think, they go to the Paris Expo, and they go to a hotel, and then he vanishes, and everybody tells her, he was never here. You came here alone, right? So it's kind of really Hitchcockian sort of thing. Yeah. You got the title of it there?
So Long at the Fair.
So Long at the Fair, right. Yeah.
I've never seen it. I don't think I've even heard of it, but it sounds awesome. I love Terrence Fisher.
He co-directs, so I don't know the whole story about it. I have a few books on him, so I need to look it up. And of course, Gene Simmons, great actress, lovely woman. Not a horror film, but a suspense film.
Sure.
By one of the great horror directors. So, yeah, I watched that recently. Yeah, I think, that's sort of my classic horror. I've sort of gone through a period where I haven't been watching a lot of stuff.
Sure.
It's just, but now I'm trying to, drop back and enjoy the pleasures of visual cinema and especially the classic stuff.
You alluded to, you had some life changes and all that. And I know that this past year was a little rocky for Beth and I as well regarding everything that we had going on. Not the same as you, but I mean, things happen.
Right. Sure.
And my movie consumption plummeted. I normally have watched hundreds of movies by the end of the year. And I think this is the first year that I've watched so few films. I keep track of how many movies I watch a year because I'm that kind of nerd. And
I understand.
I look at previous years and I just haven't watched nearly as many films. But, life gets in the way. The nice thing is that they're always waiting for you.
That's right.
So
that's right.
On the Fair, I got to see that.
Check it out. I think you'll enjoy it.
So Long at the Fair.
So Long at the Fair. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. It's a class job. Truly what you would call a minor solid film. Minor simply in that, it's not Gone with the Wind. It's not King Kong, you might say. But it's a solid, well-acted, entertaining film.
Well, I will have to check that out. Like I said, I know though that when life gets in the way, it's hard to keep up on all the movies. Fortunately, you've gotten back to the writing, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show, is I want to talk about your new book.
Super.
We've kind of alluded to it a little bit. It's King Kong, but it's not just King Kong.
I really didn't write it.
Well,
it's sort of a posthumous collaboration.
I was going to say it's a collaborative effort between you and the original novelist, Delos Lovelace. Did I say that right? Is it Delos?
Yeah, that sounds right. I'm the world's worst for pronouncing names like that. As a kid, I thought Socrates was Socrates, you know.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. So how did you say it? I like the way you said it, you know.
Well, I
Delos?
said Delos, but I could be wrong
I
as
would
well.
say Delos, but I like Delos.
Delos?
That sounds
Okay.
good. Yeah, that sounds like a good soap opera villain name, doesn't it? You know, for
it does.
The evil patriarch Delos, I'll get you. You know,
Oh, I love
pay
that.
for this.
I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah, in fact, even his name, Delos Lovelace, sounds like it's
that's a
a
great
Wild
name.
Wild West villain. yeah, and his middle name is Wheeler. Delos Wheeler Lovelace. That's what the W is for. So.
Oh, I love that too. Oh, yeah, definitely a villain. You know, and I'm looking at a picture of him off of the Wikipedia page. He's got that little mustache on there.
Oh,
and this
yeah.
glint in his eyes. Oh, he looks like a villain.
Yeah. But apparently, I mean, from my study, he was a sweetheart of a guy in real life.
Okay.
And one of the things that impressed me so much was his relationship with his wife, Maud Hart Lovelace, who was a novelist and has proven to be the more enduring of them. She wrote a series of books that start out as children books. And then as the characters get older, the writing style gets mature. So you get into juvenile. It's called the Betsy Tacy series is what everybody calls it. And it's two little girls, Betsy and Tacy. And it was based on her experiences growing up in Minnesota, you know, early 20th century or whatever. She follows them from childhood into school and high school. And then Betsy goes to Europe and Betsy gets married. And Betsy is Maud, and Joe, her suitor, is Delos Lovelace. The Betsy marries the fictional counterpart of Delos as well. So their fictional surrogates get married as well. You know, it's like the end of a Shakespearean play. Everybody gets married. You know, even your make believe analogs, you know, or whatever. And yeah, she's so popular, you know, that her house there is like a state monument with her picture outside, and fans travel there because you can still recognize locations from the books and all. So she turned out to be the more enduring writer with a name, right? I mean, everybody sees the King Kong novelization, and Delos there is buried under Edgar Wallace and Marion C. Cooper, and he never had any notoriety himself lasting beyond this novel, although he wrote a lot. And early on in the writing career, he was the successful one. He was writing for a lot of, it was the golden age of print fiction, print media. And we missed out, Derek. We're like 100 years too late, my friend. Because, the golden days of print, I mean, you got artists like N.C. Wyeth, illustrating the covers. It's just wonderful. So before Kong, he'd published almost 100 short stories. He was getting higher grade magazines, and she wasn't, and they were so supportive of each other, and he encouraged her to become a novelist. And with her second novel, she had her first big hit, which I read and I loved it. It's called Early Candlelight, and it is the best synthesis to me of history and fiction. And it's set at Fort Snelling, where Delos was stationed during World War I.
Okay.
But she takes it back to the 1840s. And so you've got this just amazing sense of time and place, where the Eastern colonies are moving west, they're in the fort, this is about as far as the West goes at this time. But then you've got the Native American and French influx, right? And it's just such a wonderful slice, of history, and this intermixing of people and interacting. And the main character, whose family's sort of like some squatters, she's wonderful. You see her grow up. There is a love story there. It's kind of, basically your Cinderella story, but the details in it, you want to get to the end, but you never want it to end. And that's how I felt about Early Candlelight.
Okay.
I fell in love, with those people and those characters in that situation. And I mean, they did the research. She and Delos would go and at a museum, right? And they'd pick out the furniture, for what her character would have, to be looking at it. Well, this will go here. And yeah, she was very keen on her research. It was so popular in Minnesota, they brought her back to Fort Snelling and gave her like a military march.
Oh.
It was the first time in history that had been done for a civilian lady.
Okay.
It was such a popular novel. But after that, although she continued to put out books, and she and Delos collaborated on some. Now he's working as a newspaper man. He's got the day job, right? He's a writer, but he's got the steady paycheck. But they do collaborate on some books. But she doesn't have a hit to follow it until 1940, the Betsy Tacy series starts up. And the last volume, Betsy Gets Married, is dedicated to the woman who introduced her to Delos back 1914 or whatever, 13 or whatever. Now it's like 1955. And she dedicated it to her. But they were just the most charming couple. They're people you just read about and thought, man, I wish I'd known them. One of the things about the Lovelace's novelization that struck me is how personal at work it is. That, somebody said, hey, Derek, we're relaunching Tron and we want you to write the novelization. Well, first of all, you'd do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Second of all, you're probably not going to live the Tron experience, right? You're probably, there's going to be a lot of imagination in here, if you're writing a Star Trek novel, But Delos, what was so fascinating to me was he's writing the King Kong novelization. He's living in the year in time that Kong steps on New York. He knows New York. He's been living there for years. The novelization, there are parts of it that I count as almost diarist entries. Not that they're written that way, but he is drawing from what he knows about New York, and it's subtle things. Like one of the things that will go by us, probably people in New York who read the book early at that time picked up on it, but the people who all come to see Kong, the little references he makes about them. He makes it clear when you looked at it, he's talking about having these artsy type women from Greenwich Village. And then he makes a reference that people would have understood. These are the people from the section of town where lawyers live, where government offices are. So you're going from the mainstream to the bohemians, right? The counterculture. And he's getting them all represented, as showing up at Kong's presentation there, Denham show, which you don't get in the movie. But he knew what people from New York were like, and it's these subtleties. There's the implication that there's some gangsters there and criminals showing up for the show. So, and of course, as a newspaper man, there's a booktuber named Bartell, and he did a review of this, and I cite him in my book, and he was pointing out what I just mentioned, that fact, that he understood the different boroughs, but also he pointed out that, Delos as a newspaper man, when those newspaper guys come to take Kong's photo and all of that, we got that scene in the movie, but Delos kind of makes a bit of a meal out of it because he knows these guys, right? He's working at the New York Sun, and then he's going home to New Rochelle right next door and writing the Kong novelization. He's got to be drawing from people he knows. And that's why I say this is so much more personal, a novelization, than your typical novelization. He creates a New York that's very real, very much in its period. And, the King Kong, the movie, which is my favorite movie, the original 1933 film, it's celebrated for those opening scenes and the sense of the depression, and that streetwise, element that you get. Nevertheless, King Kong's New York is set on a soundstage. Delos's New York is set on asphalt and concrete. That's the degree of realism that he brings to it. And so, yeah, I mean, when Denham is walking along Broadway looking for his actress, it's just so interesting to me to read Maud's diary entry where she says, this evening after dinner, we walked along the lighted Broadway, So I'm thinking when he's writing that, that's the guy who knows what it's like to walk along Broadway at night. Yeah. So, so I wanted to give some attention to him as a writer. So one of the things for me as a former professional English and literature instructor, part of the fun was to go in and read some of his non-Kong fiction short stories. And okay, what stylistically do I see coming from this guy as a writer? What does he bring into the King Kong novelization? And the crazy thing was, he wasn't a pulp fiction writer. He had no aspirations to be the next Edgar Rice Burroughs, right? He was good friends with Marion C. Cooper, and they had met as newspaper men in their early days. And amazingly, I mean, as disparate as their lives were, and how far apart they lived and all, they maintained maintained a camaraderie and friendship up to his death, into the 60s.
Oh,
I was able
okay.
to get copies of correspondence that they had as late as the early 60s, where Cooper was, you probably know the story about how he was sort of contending with RKO for ownership of Kong. One part of that was locking down that, the novelization, was his, was unique to him. But along that time, his Cooper, Miriam C. Cooper's daughter's getting married, and he just mentions he's telling, Dillis, I hope you and Maud and your daughter, we want to see you. Did you get your invitation? And just all this, nice little friendly, nosy stuff, for me, these to be in other people's mail posthumously, perhaps, but it was just really neat to see the friendship, between them. And of course, I was very interested in did he ever write anything about what was his process, in writing this? Well, there's one letter, but he does refer specifically to changes in the novelization. And he intentionally makes some alterations that if you know the movie, it's sort of glaring, right? And he does briefly address his reasons for that.
Now, the novelization itself was released prior to.
That's correct. Full months, yeah. End of December, which, by the way, again, and I had no control over this, believe me. I meant for my book to be out before Christmas, and we were having production problems again, holding it up. But as it turned out, and again, I will give a salute to my Lord, because my version came out to the day that Lovelace's came out. Yeah. Yes, Lovelace's came out on December 27th, 1932, and mine came out officially. I mean, I went to bed. I don't know exactly when Amazon pushed the button, but when I went to bed on December 26th, it wasn't out. When I got up on December 27th, it was out. So on Amazon, it'll say December 26th, right? But perhaps depending on what time zone you're living in, I'm going to take a little slice there, right? That's pretty close. So yeah, his came out on December 27th, 1932, and mine followed on December 27th, 2024. So 92 years, I think. So that was a pretty cool little tie-in, right?
It's out now. What's been the reaction to it?
There are, people who have expressed, well, let me put it this way. There are a lot more King Kong fans out there than Micah Swanson Harris fans out there. It come out as a shock. I'm a small press publisher. So for me, I am proud to say that they've been, it came out the 27th. They've been pretty steady. It's kind of a slow but steady thing. And it just amazes me that this movie is almost 100 years old. And guys on the internet are pulling out photos and things. That's like, I've never seen that. Why did I never see all this time? And here I'm finding information, that's like, wow. This is stuff that has never been addressed before. I think, I sort of had this idea when it comes to scholarship or film scholarship. And also, as I was saying, with Dillis Lovelace himself, it's like, yeah, everybody's going to write about King Kong the movie. Everybody's going to write about, pick your favorite horror author, or Robert E. Howard, the big guys, right? But then there's sort of the unloved, sort of side kids, right, in the extended family. What I used to call, the Cinderellas of the genre, right? They're not getting a lot of attention, but Cinderella's pretty interesting when you get to know her. She turns out to be a princess, right? Under all that soot and everything, right? She's kind of amazing. And so I think it's fun to look into the corners of things.
Sure.
Maybe nobody's dancing with that girl at the dance, but you go over and talk to her. You might find her so interesting you want to cut a rug with her, as we said in the olden days. I'm getting up there, Derek. And so I found that Dillis W. Lovelace was very much like that. And the novelization was very much, this is something that deserves some attention. Let's bring him out of the corner, get a spotlight on him. There's some, some things that sometimes get overlooked, that fall in the corner.
This kind of scratches the copyright nerd in me too a little bit, because
I know that nerd very well.
I'm fascinated by copyright, public domain, all of that stuff.
Me too, buddy.
So when we look at this book, I'm sure one of the questions has to be is how are you getting away with writing and publishing this with the original Loveless material? Well, the novel itself has fallen into the public domain. The
Correct.
film is not in the public domain. The character
No.
of King Kong, I'm sure there's like 1,000 trademarks on him or it or whatever. But the novel itself fell into the public domain, and I know that that has been used as a point of contention or used as a reason why Kong may have appeared in other projects with
Right.
or without
Fa-
authorization. And I find that fascinating as well.
Yeah, and with the introduction, I've got a list of a lot of those. That's quite amazing, including musicals one in Germany.
Yeah.
Based on the novelization. And yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That fascinates me too as well. I'm always interested in it. And, basically anybody can, if you can get a copy of the text of the novelization, the original from 32 that hasn't been altered or whatever, and you can print it, you can publish it. And in fact, you may recall when Peter Jackson's version came out in 2005, it came out an audio book with features with maybe Ray Bradbury talking about Kong, Harlan Ellison talking about Kong. I've got a CD adaptation that people did of it, and then the actual book itself. There are a few editions that people are putting out, because you can do that, and you can copyright your version, but the actual text of the original is in the public domain, and anyone can do what they want to with it. Now, as far as extending the Kong character, my word, it's been done.
Sure.
This stuff, it's just like the one I love was the cartoon series where the the grandmother clones Kong from the Empire State Building and then bonds him genetically, plus with the net. This is like the late 90s, with her grandson, and then he and Kong can come together at a time of crisis, which is such a trippy sequence. Even Stanley Kubrick was like, I don't think so. Looking at this imagery. And then, this is what I love, when they join, not only does Kong get bigger, he gets the grandson's martial arts knowledge.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
It's just like, yeah, on one hand, I'm like, this is so absurd. And on the other hand, it's like, man, I wish I'd thought of it. This kind of thing. So I think it's safe to say nobody at the Marion C. Cooper estate signed off on that, right?
No.
But it's not called King Kong, right? It's Kong.
Good point.
Right? Yeah, and I think that's one reason you have Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I was going to mention that there was a lawsuit involving Donkey Kong and all
right.
that.
So it's really strange because the Cooper ruling, was that anybody could do anything, they wanted to with the novel in terms of reprinting it. I get adapting it, I would think, anything with it. But they said, but you can't do any like sequels with the characters.
Right.
Now but that's not how public domain works.
Right. And that's why I brought up the trademark thing.
That's right. Yeah. It's like public domain's like being a little bit pregnant. You either you are you are or you ain't, right? And if you are, then all the rights, including doing so. That's why you got all these Mr. Darcy Vampire, Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen continuations, and that's how public domain works. So it was weird that local judge put it that way. And sure enough, even though that's what he said, I'm sorry, a series where Kong bonds with a teenager with martial arts powers, that's not adapting the Delos novel. That's a continuation, right?
Yeah.
And even though it's tangential, it does tie into the Empire State. See, if he had fallen off the Chrysler Building, the novelization, you couldn't have an Empire State Building connection with anything you or I did, right? It's everything peculiar to the book.
Yep.
But no, he's off the Empire State Building. And at the same time that Peter Jackson's book came out, you may remember seeing this. There was a novel, and a friend of mine said, I saw these just stacked up in the floor at the bookstore. Kong Reborn, where a guy, he did the same thing this guy's grandmother did. He clones Kong, and it's kind of like take him back to Skull Island maybe. And I actually got in touch with this guy a long time ago and said, how did you do that? He's like, the legal department handled it, But if you look, there's a little square note on the bottom of the back. It says, this project hasn't been authorized by the Marion C. Cooper, thing. And I noticed something similar. Somebody came out with an anthology of Edgar Rice Burroughs Barsoom stories, and they were unauthorized, and they had the same notation.
Yeah.
So I'm saying the judge may have seen that. Again, I'm no lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice.
No, neither one of us are lawyers
but
here.
It's just interesting that even though he made that exception, that's really not, how it works. And of course, we've seen in our time, a move to lock down IP characters that, people, when they were doing copyright things and trademarks, they didn't really foresee, right? I guess that people would be watching Mickey Mouse, 100 years later, years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But they did. Nevertheless, the Mickey and Steamboat Willie is in public domain, but it's only Mickey as he appears in Steamboat Willie.
Right. There's a couple of those shorts now. And then, of course, we're seeing things like Winnie the Pooh and Peter Pan and all that. And I think, and there's even a Popeye slasher film coming, Popeye the Slayer Man.
Oh, there you go. That's
fantastic. Because he's fallen into the public domain, or at least his first appearance.
By the way, did you know that Popeye was modeled on a real guy?
Yes, I did.
Have you seen his picture? My word.
He looks just like him.
Yeah, I know. That's scary, ain't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the one in the comic strip's the pretty one,
Yeah.
That's
this is true.
That's amazing. Yeah. But in my case, what I did was, I didn't step out of the bounds, the conservative established bounds of what you can do with the novelization. I reprinted it and I annotated it. I made commentary on it. I wrote about it, so everything is confined. And of course, the indicia, I looked at what other people have done to learn how to cover my bases, is with, disclaimers and so on. But yeah, so that's how I got, around. I mean, not around, that's how I was able to do it. It's all legal, I mean, there's no difference in me doing this and somebody doing their own annotated, their own Amazon all over the place, their own annotated edition of Pride and Prejudice, or whatever. Dracula,
for sure.
Do your own. It's in the public domain. King Kong, just in the public domain. And how that happened was by accident. Somebody slipped up somewhere, and then, as you were mentioned, the contentions that have gone on, mostly they heated up in the mid '70s with the De Laurentiis and potential Universal thing, and that's eventually what led to the Donkey Kong. But then it came out that even though, according to the doc I read, they thought, that it was locked down, that no, it turned out that the copyright had not been renewed back in 1960 properly.
Right.
And so there you go. You can adapt it, you can want to do your own audio drama, or whatever within the book. There you're safe, And like I say, a lot of people have gotten away with a lot. And when it comes to adaptation, there's a lot of room. When you're doing a musical, German on King Kong, you're pushing, you're taking a lot of, you got room for a lot of creativity there, So yeah, that's how I was able to realize that dream.
So I want to, before we kind of wrap up, what is the most surprising thing you learned about the novelization or just King Kong in general while working on this book?
The most surprising thing I learned was that Delos, as I said, on one hand, this is a very personal book. There are sections of this book where he's not just an adapter, he's an author.
Okay.
He's bringing a personal point of view to things. On the other hand, it turned out that things that had been credited, that we've all credited to him being his own invention, and some of it that didn't make sense, was never Delos. What surprised me the most was, and this was amazing, and again, this is getting into my scholarly nerdy thing here, because I like text and textual variants and all this stuff, right? He based his novelization mainly not on the shooting script, but on the next to last script, the penultimate script.
Okay.
And in that script by Ruth Rose and, who was the guy that came before? The guy who did the screenplay on The Most Dangerous Game, and he left it, but he's still credited with her because about everything in the middle on the island, James Krillman. Yeah, about everything in the island scenes, is what Krillman's version of that material, right? Which goes back to the first script with Edgar Wallace And Ruth Rose, she's got a scene in there that she added in that sequence, but basically her material sandwiches Krillman's, right? And especially the beginning, she rewrote it effectively, amazingly. She's rightly lauded, for that. But her first script, when you see it's their differences. And the changes that were made in her final script are what you see in the movie. But for some reason, Delos followed the penultimate script. And what's interesting about that is when you read the letters and the correspondence, there's nothing there that says he should have had a copy of that. Cooper says specifically, I've sent the current script. And when you look at the dates on the Ruth Rose final script and that correspondence, that should have been the final script. But Delos is writing from the penultimate, and that explains why I read what happened to Charlie the cook in the book, right? Who's this guy Lumpy?
Right.
And we've all believed that Delos created him. I thought, well, was he embarrassed to write that kind of broken English? That they got Charlie right. What's the deal? No, Ruth Rose created Lumpy. That was her character. She changed him out for Charlie. I don't know. Maybe Victor Wong's schedule freed up, or whatever, and they could get him. But anyway, that's Lumpy. And so you get, lines with, Charlie that were Lumpies. So that was interesting. Then the whole scene where Anne and Jack profess their love. Well, in the book, in the movie, that they're right before Anne's kidnapped. And it really works with the flow of the movie. The movie King Kong celebrated for its pace, right? And so that just keeps everything moving. The scene that Delos wrote was Ruth Rose's original, which took place in a crow's nest.
Okay.
And when I was first reading, I thought, oh, Delos changed this. This just fits with the kind of stories I've been reading that he wrote. Instead of the Midwest, it's a tropical scene. But no, that was Ruth Rose who wrote that. And Delos followed it. So to me, what was amazing, and to this day, I don't know why did he follow, the penultimate draft, and so especially when there was a moment briefly where the novelization was canceled, and by David O. Selznick and Cooper. And one concern was the changes they knew that would happen, between the novelization and the movie. That's typical even to this day, right? And then they put it back on, but then it's like, well, if you were concerned about the changes, why did he use a script that's even one further back removed from the actual movie? And there's some big changes, in the actual shooting script from the movie as well. So that to me was, at first it was a bit disconcerting because I thought, man, I thought I was going to be able to give Delos some more credit here. But then it was like a delight, to hit on this, and to see that and it explained things. Poor Lumpy, sort of got dropped, but he did finally make it to the screen in the Peter Jackson version.
Right.
As portrayed, by Andy Serkis. He finally got his, moments there, on the big screen. By the time he got eaten by those slugs in the pit, he might have wished he had stayed in, obscurity. But, yeah. So, yeah, to me, that was interesting. And then beyond that, Derek, that's interesting is that there's a point where when they meet the natives, suddenly Delos is not following the penultimate script. Now he's following the final script. And there's a scene in the penultimate script where after they get away from the natives, they stop on the beach and have a talk around the lifeboats. And he includes that from the penultimate, So he switches back to the penultimate, from the ultimate. Briefly, he went there. So he had it. He had a copy of it, but he was still following, the first one. And another thing that was interesting is, and this is something I've never heard anybody point out before, and I never noticed it, was that in the open of Delos's novel, they're describing the ship, which another change, which to this day I still don't understand, why he changed the name of the ship to the Wanderer, instead of the Venture, right? It sounds a little less, direct, right?
Sure.
The one for the Venture. Although I do point out the Wanderer finally made it to the big screen in Kong of Skull Island, the more recent movie, where they what was it, the Monsterverse, where they're teaming him up with Godzilla.
Okay.
This new series of movies, right? And if you go there, there's a boat that the natives on the native island, and it's called the Wonder.
Oh, is it real? Okay.
Which to me,
nice.
Yeah. So Dillos finally got something. He had, between him and his wife, made it to the screen, and I thought, well, this is interesting because this is a parallel universe where in the book they didn't make it back, right?
Yeah.
They never left the island. Yeah. And the director said he intentionally did that to kind of clue people off that this is a different universe, from the Kong movie and I guess anything else. But it turns out it's a different universe from the novelization, kind of a tragic one, it seems like.
Yeah, altogether different.
But other than that, he mentions that from the beginning that the guys are, like, what's up with this big steel chamber in the hull? Why is Denham, plated the hull with steel? And that is in the Krillman draft, which preceded the Ruth Rose penultimate draft. So it's like he had access to that. The reason they dropped it, if you think about it, is why would Denham have that fitted out like he was expected to find a big monster, a big thing, and bring it back when his intent is we're just going to go film it, right? It was like it was always an intent to go find and capture it. So Ruth Rose caught that and dropped it because it made no sense. Delos preserved it, in his script. Although it turns out, in the actual movie, we're never really told how they get him back, to get him to the ship, how they transport him to New York. Well, Delos tells you how, that's actually a point where the De Laurentiis movie is more on mark, with the original intent because you see Kong in the hold. So to me, it was fascinating. It was very interesting and intriguing to see that, first of all, he had the final script at some point, but he was following the next to last one.
Okay.
That was his primary source. Yeah. And then at times, if he just did that, it would still be weird that Cooper's saying we've sent him I've sent to New York the up-to-date scripts, and it's not the up-to-date script. Because, they had dates on them. I thought, well, maybe they got him, just made an honest mistake because there's so many similarities. But no, he would have got it. So it's weird that he had that and he worked from that, but then also to see that he had access to the final one, and that apparently it seemed to me that at one point he actually went back and pulled from the previous one. So it appears that he had 3 different versions of that script, and for some reason, made the penultimate the primary one, which I'm glad he did. It's so much more interesting, to have the variants, I think, and to have this alternate version. And of course, when Kong went into public domain, that just made it better for everybody else because all those things differentiated even more the novel, right, from the movie. And you can take those things. And that's why, too, Carl Denham is always called Denham unless it's a RKO authorized licensed film, because Loveless only calls him Denham. He's only called Denham in that second draft, in that penultimate draft. One time his name was Fritz Denham, and I think we can be glad that didn't go through, right?
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, nobody does. And then he was Denham, and then he was Carl. But then you think, well, why didn't you look at the penultimate script and see he was given that first name and just not? But if you want to know if a Kong project has been authorized, and the character of Carl Denham is in that movie, but they never call him Carl, and they just call him Denham, it's not authorized. It's coming from the legalities, where they can say based on the Dillis Lovelace novelization. And again, as I said, that change, that difference in him taking that version of the script has really distinguished the novelization from the movie, which just makes more of a case for it as a separate work. And also what was surprising was that under the copyright laws of the time, the fact that the novelization came out first meant that the movie was counted as a derivative work of the novelization. So legally, the novelization is the primary work, and the movie's an adaptation, even though that's not the truth on paper. Legally, that's what it says. So that in itself gave the novelization a primacy, right? And a sense of the definitive, even though it's not, in separate work. So yeah, it's to me, it's a lot of fun, pulling out these things and maybe resolving a few mysteries, about who's this lumpy character? Where's Charlie?
There will be links in the show notes to Micah's Amazon author page, as well as links specifically to the Wonder magazine and the Last Tales of the Shadow Men book that he mentioned. Please check them out. Support the people that make the Monster Kid community so vibrant and live for us today by checking out Micah's books. Huge thanks to Micah for being part of the show. I'm also going to make sure there's a link in the show notes to his website. It's minorprofitpress.com. Minor is spelled M-I-N-O-R, and then profit, like you're making some money, press.com. Again, check it out in the show notes over at monsterkidradio.net, where you're going to find information about everything that you've heard about here in the show, as well as links to all of our social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, or X, I guess, Reddit, Discord, and Patreon, where you will find a brand new video finally posted, letting y'all know what to expect from our Patreon page in 2025. You do not need to be a paying patron to watch this video, so please go check that out. It is a Patreon exclusive. And as I say in that video, we're going to start using Patreon as another way to post about the show. You can follow the Patreon page without being a paying patron. So votes, polls, announcements, check it out at patreon.com/monsterkidradio. Of course, we're trying to get our other social media presences a little bit more beefy, to kind of beef things up a little bit. I don't know why I'm using a beef metaphor when I'm a vegetarian, but we're trying to make things a little bit more meaty. That doesn't make it any better. We're trying to be more present in the social media space. I know that when Monster Kid Radio took its hiatus a couple of times last year, things kind of died off a little bit. And the way the algorithms work on places like Facebook and everywhere else online, stops making things pop up nearly as much as it used to. Well, this is where you come in. By sharing posts on Facebook, by getting involved in conversations on Facebook or X. And I swear I'm going to get that blue sky set up sometime between this week and next week's episode. Getting involved online lets the various algorithms know that this is the kind of material that you're interested in. And it helps us out, and it helps you out because it gives you more material like what you're getting here on The Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Also, if you're a content creator and you happen to be on Facebook and you're creating content that's relevant to what we do here at The Bride of Monster Kid Radio, I really don't mind if you post your posts in the Facebook page or group. However, I am going to ask you to return the favor by sharing our posts in your group. I've noticed that sometimes people do post things on Facebook in the Monster Kid Radio community, but they don't really return the favor. So I'm asking you to do that, to please let people know that we are back. We're back on our weekly schedule. We've been going now for a solid 2 months in a row. I don't see any reason why that's going to change. So we really need your help to make sure the internet knows that we are back and we're delivering the kind of content that you enjoy here at The Bride of Monster Kid Radio. And speaking of content that you enjoy, next week, we are getting back into the kaiju stew. This time it's a vegetarian stew, I promise. It's going to be a good time. It's Godzilla Raids again, and Beth's coming back to the show. We're going to talk about that one. She's never seen it before. If you remember, recently she saw Godzilla for the very first time. Now it's time to see the first Godzilla sequel for the very first time. I'm not going to ask her to sit down and watch Gigantus the Fire Monster, as much as I really love that one too. That's the American version where they shot some American footage and shoehorned it in. Not nearly as well as they did with Godzilla King of the Monsters, but still. But we are going to watch Godzilla Raids again, and I cannot wait to get her thoughts on it. And I really can't wait to share that with you next week here on The Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Bride of Monster Kid Radio is a Team Death production. All original content of Bride of Monster Kid Radio is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 Unported license. You can learn more about Team Death, our other projects like Death Designs, Mail Order Zombie, the Team Death YouTube channel, and more at www.teamdeath.com. Remember, death is spelled D-E-T-H. All previous episodes of this podcast, as well as the original Monster Kid Radio podcast, are available at www.monsterkidradio.net. Please rate and review Bride of Monster Kid Radio wherever you download your favorite podcasts. On the Waves of Disinformatia is copyright 2024 Magnatech. It appears on their album, Beth?
Tanzkapelle.
Thank you. And you can find that over at magnatech.bandcamp.com, or again, follow the link in the show notes. My name's Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week when Beth and I get into Godzilla raids again. Ciao.